This is John Mathewson. I'm the curator here at the Dorset Historical Society. I'd like to welcome you to our third Thursday lunchtime lecture, our third one for 2022. We've got a great slate of speakers this year. For instance, next month, just to let you know before we move on, is Lynn Blackwell, who will be talking about women's history in Vermont. I'm very much looking forward to that. I'm also looking forward to our April speaker, who will be Bill Mayers, who's standing right there. Bill has written more books than some people can count. Some of them humorous, some of them not so humorous. I know him, of course, from the books he's written with Frank Bryan, Out, the Vermont Secession book, Real Vermonters Don't Milk Goats, the Vermont A User's Guide, and his more serious books like Bees Besieged, and Fishing with the Presidents. And through just the way life wends its way around, I met Bill back in the 1990s when I was the curator over at the Fly Fishing Museum, American Museum of Fly Fishing. He came in looking for ideas, and I said, well, there are a bunch of presidents who fly fished. And so he sat down and started looking at the books that ex-presidents had written. And so I am a character in one of his books, which makes me so proud. And then later on, I became a part-time beekeeper, and Bill has written a book on bees. He's also been the president of the Vermont Beekeepers Association for many years and is very active in that, which makes the annual meetings very, very fun to attend. He's also written a history of Vermont beekeeping, he and Russ Conrad and someone else whose name I'm forgetting right now. But anyway, he's also been a teacher for his career, so he knows how to talk to an audience, and this is going to be a great talk, so give it up for Bill Mayers.
John, it's very, very sweet. Thank you very much for having me. And it's a pretty small room, so I hope you don't have to say, please speak up or speak down, but it's really nice to be here in Dorset. And so I'm going to talk for maybe 30 minutes, 35 minutes, and then if you have questions, I'm happy to try to answer them. And so I wanted to start with, it's not a great picture, but this is my co-author. This is Don Hooper, and he really did the heavy lifting in this book because he did about 100 cartoons in it, and I was just just a pretty face. But we met 40 years ago in the legislature when we were both first year representatives in 1984 or 5, and kept up our friendship. And even though I co-authored a book called Real Vermonters Don't Milk Goats, he was a goat farmer, and so we had some interesting discussions about that. And so I wanted to go through a few of the things. This is, of course, you can read it, I think. Timeless Vermont humor, dry, wet, whatever. Dry as Calvin Coolidge, soggy as Victory Bog. We asked Jeff Danziger to write the foreword for this book. Jeff Danziger is a really national cartoonist who has lived in Vermont and off and on for 50 years. And one of the things he says, standard, you lowlife.
If only it was in the library.
Hey, come on up here in the front and sit so I can spit on you.
Wait, isn't there a law that says you two cannot be in the same room at the same time?
There is.
Okay, fine.
It's another law we're breaking.
All right. Anyway.
Mayor, it's nice to see you.
No, this is great. Thanks
Am
for
I supposed to
coming.
play here? Or am I...
No, all you do is sit down and shut up, and then you can talk at the end.
All right, let's see.
You know all these people, and I don't. So.
Oh, yeah, this is Bill Mayers. Thank you. He's a friend of mine.
All right.
You
So
want an
this is-
introduction? I could introduce.
No, John's done it.
Okay.
So, so Danziger says, in part, what Vermont humor is best defined by is what it is not. It is not cruel. It is not transient. It is not self-amused. It is not loud or slapstick. If all those possibilities are removed, either intentionally or inadvertently, you wind up with a kind of pleasant observational strain, like the farmer who's told that with God's help, he's made a successful farm out of his rocky land. Yes, he says, but you should have seen this place when the Lord was running it by himself. But Vermont humor is not all farmer wit. Most of what's funny here is the acceptance of how things are and why, given the initial difficulties of weather, rocky soil, shortages, and economic desiccation. People stay here. Most of what's in this book shows a background evaluation of what really matters in life. The funny stuff is on the surface, but you have to be here to see why it is funny. In a way, it defies description, except to point out that Vermonters find each other amusing, even when they don't say anything. Silence, as in a straight line. So, I'll read this to you in case you can't see it in the back row. But we made this up. So, Dog River Doggerel. Some say Vermont humor's awful dry. Others describe it as kind of wry. Sneaky types proclaim it sly. Affix your label, kindly try. Its joyful whimsies often playful, snicker, chortle, all your dayful. Its incongruities a brimming trayful. Laconic Vermonters voice gentle wit. Dirty, nasty, not one bit. Sick, slick, filthy, those don't fit. Feast therefore on modest deadpan. Troll this droll as best you can. So this is Hooper's drawing of himself. And he loves to say that he was the only kid in his kindergarten class who couldn't figure out how to keep his drawing inside the squares. But he's refined this into really grand art, ready for the Museum of Modern Art in New York.
He's gotten better.
And this is me. I was the only, I think, member of the House then who wore a bow tie, and so that was his capturing of me.
We never forgave you for that.
Well, the title of the book comes from an apocryphal story. Well, maybe it's true. That's the good thing about humor. If you've got an audience that doesn't know the truth, you can pass it off as truth. But supposedly he came to Brattleboro to give one of his great speeches. And he went on for 2 hours. You know, what he thought was a stem winder. It was just so great. But he couldn't raise a smile, a snicker, a chortle, nothing. And he got so annoyed that he left the stage, went around the front, and waited for people to leave. And he overheard this couple getting into their buggy. And the man says, "Funny, funny, well that guy was so funny I could hardly keep from laughing." So we thought that really captured what Vermont's dry humor was and is. And this is Hooper's drawing thereof. Well, we sort of did this chronologically until we got to the present day, and then it kind of broke up into themes. But we started with the humor that came before people came to Vermont. And so the first chapter is called The Farmer. And we found, or I found in the Vermont Historical Society, a wonderful little booklet called Vermont Laughter that had no publishing date, had no publishing place, and had no publisher. And but we did have a name, a guy named Robert C. Davis. Well, we've never been able to find anything about him, but it was a great little 40 pages of wonderful jokes. And he speculated that a lot of the humor was based upon farms. And he recalls, he says, intellectually, his father, and his Vermonters were keen, their minds were keen as traps. They carried no ounce of surplus fat, either physically or mentally. Theirs was heavy work, and always on the margin of privation. The farming they practiced was not of the scientific variety of later times. To walk behind a plow, cut grain with a scythe, and cultivate corn with a hoe is an occupation which leaves the brain free to range. but their brains needed something to gnaw on. Some men schemed out trades or mechanical inventions. Others, like my father, practiced their intellectual calisthenics in revamping and refining their collection of witty anecdotes. Here's a couple. A sign on a druggist's window. Hams and cigars, smoked and unsmoked. And at the druggist, the wife says, "You write the directions out plain on those bottles. What's for my husband and what's for the horse? I can't have anything happen to that horse before the spring planting." Little guy. Ordinarily I weigh 140 pounds, but when I get my dander up, I weigh a ton. A Vermont farmer, after years of trying, wins $50,000 in the lottery. The neighbor asks him what he'll do with his winnings. "Oh, I guess I'll keep farming until the money runs out." In a newspaper office, let's see, my next slide. The newspaper office, the widow asked, "How much do obituary notices cost?" 50 cents an inch, ma'am. "Oh, we can't afford that. Father was 6 feet 2. Neighbor says, "Jed's run off with Fern's wife." Answer, "Not in Jed's new Ford, not in Fern's new Ford." So this was Hooper's cartoon. Well, we had a whole string of, Davis had a whole string of stories about what he called the village idiot. Now we call him the village imbecile. There's a guy named Ira.
Congressman. Or congressman or senator.
Or standard. But here's a couple. He says, Ira was so proud. He bought it when he bought his first toothbrush. "Will you have paste on it?" asked the druggist. "No, they're dirty, but they ain't loose." So a local farmer was short of workers at the height of the haying season. Against his better judgment, he asked Ira to help for a few days. "How much you pay me?" asked Ira. "Every cent you're worth." "Oh, no, I want a little more than that." Ira had a famous dog named Helen Rats, stuck to him like glue. But one time, he got a very scarred muzzle, and someone said, "What happened?" He said he followed a rat into a keg of nails. But the dog was famous as a vermin hunter, and several merchants tried to buy him without luck. "How much you want for him?" asked one of the town fathers. $50,000, that's my price, said Ira. "Too rich for me," said the man. A day later, the man saw Ira without the dog and asked, "Where was it?" "Sold it," said Ira proudly. "Holy cow, how much?" "My price." "Did you get cash?" "Not exactly, but I did get two $25,000 cats." So, sure enough, following New Hampshire and New York, people started coming from away to Vermont in the 20s, 30s. And mostly they go away in the fall, but some stayed, and Vermont started to make snow a tourist attraction. Invariably people came from as far away as Texas. And you've all heard this story, I'm sure, about the Texan who comes in and asks the farmer, "Oh yeah, how big's your farm?" And the farmer says, "Well, about 300 or 400 acres. And the Texan says, "Oh, I have a farm where you can get into the pickup truck and you can drive all morning and all afternoon and still not get home at night." And the Vermonter says, "Well, yeah, I have a pickup truck like that and I sold it." But even, I come from Texas, so I enjoy both ends of this joke, but my favorite one is where the Texan drives up and he sees a guy out digging up rocks in the field. And of course he stops and he says, "What are you doing?" And through clenched teeth he says, "Picking up the rocks." And the Texan won't let go. He says, "Well, where'd the rocks go?" he says, where'd the rocks come from? He says, glacier brought them. And the Texan says, well, where'd the glacier go? He says, back to get more rocks. Well, again, New Yorkers came, and people from the counterfeiters come in, and they want to change an $18 bill. So the guy behind the counter said, well, sure, I can do that. And do you want 2 9s or 3 6s? So, snookered by their own counterfeiting. We call this, this is Herman Lugnut, and a big shiny Cadillac stopped in front of a country store. The driver blew his horn loudly until an old man in dirty overalls limped out. The tourist says, listen, my car stops once in a while and then starts again. I had it in 3 city garages, and none of them could fix it. I don't suppose you could fix it, but can you try? The old man lifted the hood, studied the situation a few minutes, took out an old jackknife from his pocket, scraped a piece of metal, went back to the garage for an oil can, squirted a drop of oil and shouted, start her up. The engine roared and purred like a kitten. The amazed tourist asked, how could those experienced mechanics in the city, with all their expensive equipment, fail, and you found the trouble in a few minutes? The old man scratched his head and he says, well, mister, when you ain't got no learning and no expensive gadgets, you just have to fall back on your thinking. So, and so this is, I don't know, this is close to being Hooper's favorite. So the Flatlander, person from away, sees the farmer out, and here's what he's doing. Trying to get the pig up closer to the apples. He says, hey, Mr. Farmer, don't you think if you just shook the tree and let the pigs eat the apples off the tree, wouldn't that save some time? The farmer says, perhaps, but you know, what's time to a pig? Well, in the early 80s, Frank Bryan and I stumbled onto this wonderful idea that made us famous. And we wrote this book in 6 weeks, and then it sold 45,000 copies in 4 months. Because it really, not because we were geniuses, but because it really hit that moment in the 80s when the Flatlanders were coming into Vermont, and the Vermonters were watching it with some degree of dismay, like Stannard. And it was funny enough, it had great cartoons, that people were sending them away or sending them to relatives, you know, all over the place. So we sold really 1 copy for every 10 people in Vermont. It was, I think, partly because of this book, I got elected to the legislature, because I had bumper stickers that said, a real Vermonter for Bill Mayers, and a Flatlander for Bill Mayers, and just a Vermonter. Those were the people who didn't want to omit one or the other. Well,
And we hold you responsible for the people who came here, because they sent this book out.
I know.
And people said, we gotta move to Vermont.
what, no, I mean,
So it's your fault.
Been part of the tourist. So the book was really quite simple. It had, well, the origin of the book was that 6 months before we did this, there had been a national book called Real Men Don't Eat Quiche. And so we stole, not the idea, but we stole all the format. We did this out of the New England Press. Took the format, took the size, took the length. They didn't have really any good cartoons, but it looked, you open them up and you can see how we borrowed their format. And so we had lists, we had quizzes, we dumped on real politicians, we had wonderful names of real people. It was really, dare I say, pretty clever. So we said, for example, be a list of Real Vermonters don't wear LL Bean boots. An active Vermont solar system is a clothesline. A real Vermonter's bed doesn't ebb and flow. Real Vermont pets don't get haircuts. No real Vermont house has barn boards inside. No real Vermont house is known by the name of its current owners. And a real Vermont farmer is someone who gets up in town meeting and identifies himself as a farmer, and no one laughs. How do you know a real Vermonter likes you? They invite you in through the kitchen door. They don't call you before they come to visit. They don't ask you if you'd rather have decaf coffee. They don't remind you to put on your snow tires. They don't come to visit during deer season, the first day of trout season, any Sunday in afternoon in October, or until the driveway dries in April. They don't offer you extra vegetables from their garden. And when they see you, they don't say any of the following: how's the family? Or we got to get together sometime when things settle down a bit. Or how's by you? They don't call to tell you to cover the tomatoes. And they don't offer to help unless you need it. So this is Hooper's summation. This is the famous story about our two sons were born in Vermont, but neither my wife nor I. So, I could tell this on so I would really talk to somebody like Stannard, who's 8th generation Vermonter, and he comes back and says, well, just because the cat has kittens in the oven, you don't call them muffins. And so this is Hooper's drawing of that. Well, then we couldn't leave well enough alone. So Frank and I decided, or when I was there, and Stannard and Hooper, we said, well, there's some funny real stories in Vermont. So we started collecting them, and we used this device where we created 2 custodians, Vern and Chet, who would go around into wastebaskets and onto people's desks and steal, borrow, take stories that, of course they're making them up, and we're making them up, but we're getting them from people. So I had a stack about 2 inches thick of letters that I got from people where they were telling me stories, many of which we put in the book. But the device was, these guys would take the stories down to the men's bathroom in the bottom of the State House, which is an incredible room. You should go in sometime, make sure it's all right. But it's a real Victorian thing with marble floors, and they had this strong box, and they would put the stories in there, and then they'd take them out and tell stories. So, I'm not going to read you a lot of them, but 2 of the famous users of malapropisms in Vermont politics. One was Tom Salmon, who was governor 72 to 76, and he, they even called them salmonisms. But his most famous salmonism was when he was getting into a great speech, and he was talking about how great the Vermont economy was, and he said, education is the 4th leg of the tripod of the Vermont economy. And then, let's see, the other practitioner of these, really Vermont's answer to Yogi Berra was Senator Gilbert Gottnick from Rutland. And he had a furniture store, then he became mayor, then he became a senator. And he had wonderful mixed metaphors. So he would say things like, well, we'll burn that bridge when we get to it. Or there's a rotten egg in every barrel of apples. Or I don't care what the polls say. What's really important is when the voters go behind the Iron Curtain. And then this one is, well, that's a horse of a different ballgame. Well, this is Fred Tuttle running when he ran against a carpetbagging Jack McMullen, who's, people called him McMillions, from Massachusetts, came to run for senator in Vermont, and Fred Tuttle got encouraged by John, what was his name? John, guy from Tunbridge.
So,
Never mind, anyway.
I'll remember it tomorrow.
Yeah, not soon enough. So he ran, Fred ran against him, and at first McMillions didn't want to debate him, but finally they had a debate, and Fred was able to embarrass him by asking him how to pronounce certain Vermont towns, like the town of Calais, and of course McMullins pronounced it Calais, and asked him, what's a tedder? This is a tedder, a teda. And so this was Hooper's characterization of this wonderful guy who won the primary and then immediately endorsed Pat Leahy in the general election. Well, we went and got other people to help us, including Stannard, and this is Danny Gore, otherwise known as Norm Lewis, who was a school teacher, principal, superintendent up in the Northeast Kingdom. And for 20 years or so, he'd run for governor every 2 years. And he had, let me just find some of his platform here. Gore, here we are. Campaign promises were simple. Positions, not polls. Issues, not image. Wisdom, not words. Common sense, not consultants. Message, not media. Simple language, not lawyers. Commitment, not committee. Decisions, not delegation. Policy, not politics. And facts, not fertilizer. And he also had a wonderful, even when he was not running, he'd be asked to speak, kind of like this, but he'd bring in a stack of newspapers that were 2 or 3 days old, and he'd flip through them, and he was so quick that he could just really say something funny and apposite based on the headlines he was reading. He really was a genius at this stuff, and he created fictional community up in the Northeast Kingdom, Avery's Gore, and he had various interesting characters in there, like his cousin Castor, and he said, and God just didn't put a bubble in his level. Well, then we had Willem Lang, who we used one of his episodes about mud season, and then we couldn't resist throwing some smoke bombs across the Connecticut at New Hampshire and disparaging them. This happens to be my license plate, but we had we found this wonderful poem. John McCullough was, well, at least 3 or 4 or 5 generations. His father had been governor in the 1890s. He lived down in North Bennington, and we found this poem, or his son lent us this poem. So think about, if you all know what's on the Vermont or the New Hampshire license plate, okay, and this is his doggerel about that. Freewheeling thoughts while following a New Hampshire car down the straight and narrow road, being free verse with liberty and license too. Blessings on thee, little state, wearing your patriotism on your license plate. No hard-bitten Yank is supposed to believe in wearing his heart upon his sleeve. Then what sort of faith is this we keep all sloganized and just tin deep. Live free or die, the tin plate states. Die? Free? I? Who? He? Why? Me? Me? Free? Free, for instance, to expurgate or otherwise obliterate this tin commandment, which this state feels free enough to legislate and put upon the license plate of every free man in the state. The state states, no, I'm not that free. Such freedom is a state offense, with time in jail as consequence. And freedom doesn't long prevail in jail. How free then must I try to be, or worse yet, be compelled to be? If I don't try to not comply, then must I die. I cry thy help, O gentle reader. Pray take me to your union leader. Yet come to think of it, I am free, as free perhaps as man ought be. My patriotism I need not vaunt, unless I want. You see, I'm living in Vermont. So we fell in love with this. We finally we were able to pronounce it. What are called paraprostokians, in which the second part of a statement eviscerates the first part. So in this case, this is a Stephen Wright specialty. So you don't need a parachute to skydive. You just need a parachute to skydive twice. So, tin whistles are made of tin. What are foghorns made of? You come to a fork in the road. You really ought to take it. And these next two, these are from my father. These were two that I grew up on. The first one was, the steam that toots the whistle never turned a wheel. And an expert is the person who avoids all the minor errors as he sweeps forward to the grand fallacy. Now, we also have a chapter on really the stand-up comics of the last 20 years that have really sort of populated Vermont, and many of them are women. But before I read that, I have to just come to one of standard stories in here. This is not necessarily a feminist story, but it's about a woman. This is Mavis Maelstrom. Okay. Even normally generous Vermonters can mete out spontaneous humorous retribution after enduring a lifetime of abuse from a virago. You know what a virago is, it's shrew, right? Mavis Maelstrom of Manchester was known for her rudeness. She seldom, well, never actually, said a pleasant word about or to anyone. When people saw her striding up Main Street in her house dress and trademark red wool sweater, they steered clear of the abuse she would surely administer. Some years later, at Mavis's open casket funeral, the sweetest man in the world, Chester Cheermeister, delivered retribution. A longtime target of Mavis's derisive invective, Charlie opined in more than a stage whisper to the congregants, I see Mavis is wearing her red sweater. Well, she won't be needing that where she's going. So Tina Frimmel graduated from St. Mike's 4 or 5 years ago, and she has cerebral palsy, but she decided that she was not only going to live with it, she's going to use it as part of her, maybe not all of her comedy routine, but certainly a large part of it. And so she says, my jokes are not about being disabled. They're about people reacting to me being disabled. It's like putting up a mirror to the audience and showing them what I see. So this is from the introduction to one of her performances in New York. Hi, I'm Tina, and I'm disabled. But don't worry, you're going to be okay. I mean, I'm kind of disabled. Not really though. I'm kind of half and half. I'm not really fully committed to this lifestyle. I'm like the bisexuality of the ability. I'm bi-able or Bible. So I'm a bit of an enigma, right? Like people see me and they don't know what's happening. They don't know what to say. But that doesn't stop them. So I get a lot of weird things said to me. Like back when I was in high school, in art school painting a color wheel, and the girl next to me said, you know, Tina, it's so cool. You're disabled, but you're actually good at stuff, right? Well, now, these last cartoons are from Hooper's. I said, you got the last chapter all to yourself. So he's playing with, you know, he's a real climate activist. And so he drives a Tesla, and this is a cartoon where someone tells him that driving a Tesla is like driving a smartphone. And I think that it's supposed to be Allison. Do you think so?
I hope so. It looks like it.
And then the caption for this one, which we left off, is, you got to go get your duck to row. All right? And he loves to say this, the stakes have never been higher. Now, what a great image. Okay, so you think climate change is a bad thing? A registered psychologist. And he's worked for 16 or 17 years for the National Wildlife Federation. So he probably drew this one time in a boring meeting, but the conference call of the wild. So. Okay, so Rusty DeWeese is another one of our favorites, and hope he's one of your favorites too. And I'm going to give you something. The rest of this stuff is, you don't have to remember any of it, but you should remember what I'm going to read from Rusty. Okay. Laughing is curious. Why does something you hear, read, think about, or see cause your body to conjure up a laugh? I certainly don't know. And that's fine. It's not my job to know. My job is to make folks laugh. That's why I think I'm often approached by random people who want to tell me a joke. Every now and then I'm thrilled someone comes up with a really good one. Most often the jokes folks tell me fall a little flat. I'm not complaining. It's not their fault. And I'm not saying they aren't necessarily good at telling jokes. It may be I'm just not easily amused. At least by jokes. As a public service, okay, get out your notebooks. The following are tips you can work on that might make your joke telling more effective. Don't start your joke by saying, here's one you like. Don't approach the joke tellee, all proud as if you're about to whisper to them the cure for cancer. Know the joke you're telling cold. To say, oh wait, I forgot how it goes, is not acceptable. Remember, effective joke telling is serious business. Failing to prepare is preparing to fail. Goes here. Do not get up too close in the physical space of the person you're telling the joke to. And regardless of the space you've left between you and that person, you should have good smelling breath. Do not telegraph the punchline. In other words, tell the story, let the joke work on its own. Do not discount your abilities. I heard this joke, it was funny, I'll tell it to you, but I'm not really very good at telling jokes. Every time Pavarotti had a cold, he didn't hold up a sign that said, I know it's a song, it's a good one, I'll sing it for you, but I have a cold. If you want to tell a joke, commit. Besides, making excuses puts the attention on you, not where it should be, solely on the joke. You don't need to smile the whole time when telling the joke. In fact, don't smile at all, unless you're playing a character in the joke, and that character is a smiler. If you must tell a dirty joke, be sure your audience is game. I think dirty jokes are less funny, but it's all subjective. Vary the tempo of the lines in the joke. Don't rush it, and don't end every line by saying, you got it? So there's this dry fern talking to a cat. You got it? Hey, kitty, can you give me some water? You got it? Don't do that. You got it? Once you reach the crucial moment, just before the punchline of the joke, burp, cough, wheeze, barf, cry. Do all of those things if you must, but please, please don't laugh. It can work if you tailor the joke or change the words to fit your telling abilities and overall sensibilities. But you should, as much as possible, tell the joke in the manner in which it was intended to be told. Most crucial is for you to remember that you're not funny, the joke is. So see how many of the tips you can utilize when telling the following joke. A guy got a new hearing aid, was all happy and proud and bragging and told his friends, "Hey, I got a new hearing aid." And the friend says, "What kind is it?" And the guy says, "It's 1015. That's a perfect joke to hone your skills, right? Because all you have to do is say the words. Thanks. And as my dad used to tell me, walk down the path of my car, make them laugh. So, anyway, thank you very much. And I'll take questions if you want.
I actually have to run, but can I just say one small thing?
No.
You're right, I can't. It'll be a long thing. So, some years ago, when Bill and I were serving in the General Assembly, we had come back from town meeting, and he sought me out like a heat-seeking missile. I see him coming, and I'm thinking, what's the guy with the bow tie want me for? And he says, how was your town meeting, Greg? I said, it was good. He says, do you have any town meeting stories? And I said, I thought about it. I represented 7 towns: Manchester, Dorset, Danby, Mount Tabor, Peru, Land Grove, and Winhall. Might as well have been governor. And I said, yeah, I got a little story. I was in Danby, and it was when Madeline Cunin was governor, and we were talking about land use planning. It was the planning component of Act 250 that passed back in the 70s, and they left the planning component out. But now we're going to do it. And if you had a town that didn't have zoning, the state was going to do it for you. Well, guess what? That would be Danby. So I said, yeah, I want the Danby town meeting, and as I had done the previous 2 years, every time I was asked to speak, the moderator would say, it requires the vote of the people. You people want to hear from your representative. And every time they would cup their hands and go, no! And I would stand there absolutely mortified, and the moderator would look around and say, well, hearing no objection, I'm turning the meeting over to Bob. So I said, okay, listen guys, this is a serious business issue. There's this bill coming down the pike. It's land use planning. You guys don't have a zoning and planning, and they're going to do it for you, and this is really serious. And I talked for about 50 seconds. And as I said to my friend, Mr. Mayers, I said, the audience looked like a bunch of dead deer in the back of the truck with their tongue out and their eyes all gray. And they're all like totally bored to death. So I said, this might be a good place to stop and see if anybody has any questions. And there was a man in the back. Took him 3 tries to get up. He had on his black and red wool jacket and his wallet with a chain going to his belt loop. And I said, you sir in the back, and he says, yeah. He says, what do you do to make your head shine like that? Now I'm looking at my cards, and I'm like, what the hell did he say? I'm totally flummoxed. I've never been caught flat-footed in my life, and I didn't know what to say. And then there's a lady sitting where you are with her hair up in rollers with a little plastic thing over her head looking sharp for town meeting. And she says, I got a question. And I said, okay, what? Well, are you running again? I don't know. I don't make that decision. Well, I said, why? Well, I'm thinking of running against you because you voted for mandatory seatbelts. And I said, okay, you probably get more votes than I ever did, and that'd be great. Does anybody have any questions about what I'm talking about, this planning business? And the chair of the board turns around, and in a voice that you could hear at Pelcher's store, which is no longer called Pelcher's store, said, well, Bob, we ain't gonna worry too much about that guy from the state. You just send him down here and blow your freaking head right off. So I said, well, it's been nice to be here with my friends in Danby. You have fun sleeping with your sister like you've been doing since the Civil War. And I'll see you next year. This has been great fun. So that's a little Vermont humor. What do you do make your head shine like that? That got me flat-footed. Anyway, this is a good book. I did read this book. Even though I'm in it, I did read it. I skipped the part that I put in it. I would buy 2 of them so that you can give one to a friend, because based on the looks of you people here, you could all use an extra friend. So, right?
Keep going.
So maybe,
Keep going, you can insult every one of them.
Maybe 3 books, just to hedge your bets. It's a very good book, the cartoons are priceless, and I know both these guys, and I can speak for one of them.
Which one?
Well, you figure that out.
Hey, Bob,
So anyway,
before
what's
you settle down, I've got a question for you. You've had 30 years to come up with an answer.
Yeah, very good point.
Yeah. How do you keep your head so shiny?
That'll be my little secret, thank you.
anybody got any questions, statements?
Just
Yeah.
thank you for helping us laugh, we needed that.
Oh, yeah, no, it's,
This is a book that's good for your soul, there's
Yeah.
no question about it. It's a great book.
well, you know, we were pleased, the publisher was good, and frankly, you don't think about this about a book, but there's a book designer in Montpelier named Mason Singer, and he's been doing this all his life, and he really upped the game, and one time I was dreaming about having his name on the book as well, because it made such a difference, the way he laid it out, and the quotes that he took, and then the way he did the cartoons, and it was just his design that made it an even better book. He came up with the idea of a square cover, and we got, so, you know, you could do a lot worse with your $20. And as Frank Bryan used to say, you know, the signature is $20, the book's free, but then someone said, well, just give me the book, I don't care about your signature. You still gotta pay me $20, whether you get a signature or not. Anyway, anything else?
Well, Bill, thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Just to let everyone know, that Bill Childs brought some great cookies and apple cider, so that we can eat and ask Bill Mayers more questions, where we're not just sitting down, in a more informal setting. And again, Lynn Bell-Ackwell will be our May speaker, third Thursday, on Vermont Women's History. So let's give it up for Bill Mayers.
All right. Well, I gotta do something important.